Hey, I'm Allison from Learning at the Primary Pond. I'm a literacy specialist, and in this video, I'm going to share some really important things that you should know before you teach the alphabet. Now, a lot of this stuff I actually didn't know when I first started teaching, even for quite some time, but knowing this information is going to be so helpful to you in getting your kids to learn the alphabet quickly, accurately, and get them into reading and spelling words. Before we dive in, if you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, I would love for you to do that now. And then also hit the little bell so that you're notified every time I post a brand new video about teaching literacy. By the way, if you're not like a kindergarten teacher or a pre-K teacher, there actually is still going to be important information for you. This can help any teacher who's working with kids that are learning how to decode and spell, even English language learners, struggling readers. So just super great foundational information for all teachers to have. All right, so when we're talking about teaching the alphabet, we're talking about teaching the letter name, like A, and the sound, like A. Let me know in the comments if you teach letter names and letter sounds together or separately. Now, as of now, the research shows us that we should teach letter names and letter sounds together. So that means that you don't have to teach like A, B, C, D, E, get kids to recognize the letters, and then come back and do sounds. You can actually teach them together. That's what the research says. And when you're teaching the alphabet to like kindergartners who are just learning it for the first time, you want to focus on the primary consonant sounds. So like, for example, with the letter C, you wouldn't teach the S sound quite yet. If it comes up in the context of a word or you have an advanced reader, great. But for most of our kids, we're just going to start by teaching them the hard C, K sound. And then for the letter G too, right? We're not going to teach them the J sound quite yet. We're going to teach them the hard G sound. So those are the consonant sounds that we're going to focus on. One other thing to keep in mind about the consonant sounds is that, Q is a letter by itself, but you want to teach kids pretty early on that it works with the letter U, their best friends, their king and queen, whatever you want to call it, right? So Q and U work together to say Q, like in queen and quilt. Another one that I actually have had trouble saying for a long time is the sound for the letter R. Instead of saying which is like how you would spell E-R-I-R-U-R, we want to say more like like in red. Okay, so it's hard to kind of articulate that, at least it is for me, but we want to be really clear and just start thinking about saying the word red and get your mouth ready and say the R that way. Two other sounds that can be pronounced differently than maybe you've heard are the sounds for the W, like water. If you say it like then you get less of the schwa sound, like wa, right? Wa. They hear that sound, and that's confusing for kids that are just learning to read and spell words. Same thing with the Y, instead of y, right? Because y has that schwa sound after. And for any of these sounds, I'm always trying to clip my sound. So instead of b, it's b, right? I'm trying to do the best that I can to get rid of that schwa sound. Because if a child is reading and they say like bag, that's not going to sound as much like bag. It's going to be harder for them to blend. So that's why, as much as possible, we want to clip that schwa sound out of our individual letter sound pronunciations. One other tidbit about consonants, and then we'll move on to vowels. So the consonant X is a tricky one. It can actually represent a couple of different sounds in English, but the sound that I recommend teaching first is just X, which is technically a combination of the phoneme K and S, right, put together. So X, two sounds technically, but one letter. Okay, so I think that's all I wanted to share about consonants, but then let's move on to vowels. When we are teaching vowels for the first time, we know that vowels can represent different sounds, short, long, some other sounds too. We really want to focus on the short sounds first because the first words that kids learn to read and spell are CVC words, a consonant, a short vowel, and a consonant. We know that from developmental research. So for that reason, we want to teach a, I, right? Those are the sounds that we want to teach when we are first teaching the alphabet. And the vowels can be tricky for sure, but we actually don't want to teach all the consonants and then start teaching the vowels. And the reason for that is because we want to start developing kids' understanding of the alphabetic principle pretty early on. And the alphabetic principle is just the understanding that letters and sounds letters and letter combinations can represent sounds which we put together to read and spell words, right? Like if kids don't get that, they don't see it in action, they don't have opportunities to apply it, then all of this alphabet learning is just kind of meaningless, right? They need to understand why they're doing this. So very early on, after I've taught maybe like 5, 6 letters, and that would be a combination of like a couple of consonants and a short vowel, I start modeling how I use those letters, only the letters I've taught, to decode CVC words. I have the kids, even if they can't blend, I'll have them sound it out. You know, if they know M, A, and P, they can sound out app. And then I might have to say map, but they're still sounding it out. They're seeing how we put letters together to form words. Same thing with spelling. I'll actually dictate different sounds to them. Like, okay, write the letter that says S, right? They write the S, maybe it's next, and then N, and they write N. And even if they can't read it, I'll say, guess what? You wrote a word. Let me show you how I blend it. Sun, sun, you wrote the word sun. Good job. So just showing them like, you know, how these letters are working together to make words that, number one, it solidifies their understanding of the alphabetic principle, but it also reinforces the skills that you're teaching because they're actually practicing their letter sounds in context of a word. A lot of teachers will ask me, Allison, what's the best order in which to teach the letters? And my response is that research has not pinpointed one certain order that you have to teach the letters in. There are some things that we do know from research. One thing we know is that it can be easier for kids to like read, maybe even identify the first sound in a word when it's a continuous sound. So those are the sounds like that can be produced without like air stopping them, as opposed to a sound like b, where you pronounce it and that's it, right? But I can't keep saying, I kind of said the schwa there, but I can't keep saying b, right? It's impossible. It's a stop sound. So if we teach some continuous sounds first, that will help support having the kids start listening to us blend CVC words, maybe even doing a little bit on their own. So that can help if you're, you know, working on some continuous sounds first. And also mix in those short vowels, right? Don't teach all the consonants and then the short vowels and mix them in every so often. And some other research-based principles are to circle back and like review letters. Don't do letter of the week, do a couple of letters of the week. And then of course you're always reviewing, but then come back, assess the kids, and then you'll know which letters you need to come back to spend a little bit more time on them. Another thing to keep in mind is that, well, I kind of talked about this already with, you know, practicing letters over time. Don't just teach a letter one week and then drop it, like keep reviewing that. But then there are certain other letters that are harder for kids to learn and certain letters that are more common in words. So you got to spend more time on those letters. So seems simple as just the alphabet, but there's a lot of stuff to think about. If you want to have all the information that I just shared in one place, plus so much more, you got to check out my Master the Rules of English Phonics course. Now, this course is on so much more than the alphabet, but we do start with like a little bit of background on the history of English and the sounds, how to correctly produce the sounds, alphabet information, and then we move through a kindergarten through 4th grade scope and sequence, going through like, okay, what do kids learn first? What are the rules you need to know surrounding that? What are the nuances that teachers should be aware of? So I cover a big range of skills, but I highly recommend that all elementary teachers know this. A, because sometimes you have higher or lower students, but B, you never know when you're gonna switch grade levels. So I just feel like this is foundational information that I would have loved to learn in my undergraduate program, but I didn't. I would have loved to learn it in my grad school program. I didn't. I had to seek this out on my own, but it is so valuable and it really helps inform the way I teach kids how to read and spell. So again, the course is called Master the Rules of English Phonics. I will include information about it in the caption, so you can look for the link there. Thank you so much for watching. Before you go, I'd love it if you hit the like button and subscribe to our channel, and I'll see you in my next video.